Yo, we ready to get back into this? Let's go. Here we go, baby.
WWE has been going through a great renaissance over the past few years, and during this time, they've been able to bag a lot of great free agents and add them to the roster. Yes, regularly replenishing your talent pool is always going to be an important part of the success of any wrestling company, and Triple H knows this all too well. But who are the greatest free agents WWE have signed in this new era? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be looking at today, starting with one of the biggest of them all, Jacob Fatu. Yes, this is one which was expected by many given his connection to the Anoa'i family. That said, it still took a while for the Samoan werewolf to make his way over to WWE, with this not happening until 2024. Why did it take so long? Well, that's unclear, though it possibly had something to do with the legal issues Jacob found himself getting into as a youth, issues which at one point saw him serve some time in prison. Once this spell behind bars was over, though, the son of the Tonga Kid was able to turn things around and start a career in the ring, primarily with Major League Wrestling, where he became one of their top stars. And all the while he was doing this, WWE were keeping a close eye on him. So it was then that when the Bloodline angle took over WWE TV during the 2020s, everyone had one question on their minds: when was Jacob Fatu going to be brought on board as part of the group? After all, of all the Samoan wrestlers out there in the current day, he was arguably the best of them all. But as the months and years went on, he never appeared. That was until he did in June of 2024. And when he did, boy did he make an impact. Seriously, despite joining Solo Sikoa's Bloodline 2.0 as an enforcer, Jacob arguably overshadowed his leader and became the real standout of that group. And this led to many fans asking when he was going to usurp Solo and have his big match with Roman Reigns. Obviously, though, as of the time of this video recording, that's yet to happen. No, it looks like Triple H is playing the long game with this one and letting it be drawn out, possibly because he knows there's a lot of years left in the Samoan werewolf, and that if his push is paced out just right, he could even be the next face of the company one day, ahead of people like Braun Breaker and Trick Williams even. But Jacob Fatu isn't the only free agent signing WWE brought in to join the Bloodline 2.0 in 2024. They also looked eastward and found a very successful tag team with their own connections to the Anoa'i family. And those two people are our next subjects as it happens, Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa. Yes, if you were a New Japan fan during the late 2010s, then you'll be all too aware of the history of this duo. And by the time 2024 came around, they would both sign with WWE, where they would join the Bloodline story. Sure, they might not technically be members of the Anoa'i family, but with their father being legendary tough man Haku, they do have a sort of blood brother style connection in that Meng was once the tag team partner and best friend of the Tonga Kid. Of course, none of this would mean anything if Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa hadn't delivered when they debuted on WWE TV in the spring of 2024 to become members of Solo Sikoa's Bloodline 2.0. But luckily for them, whenever they've been paired together in tag team action, they've been able to do just this. And that has translated over to title success for them all over again, because as it stands today, they're former WWE Tag Team Champions. Where will they go from here? Well, we imagine that like with their time in Japan, we expect they'll become staples of the tag team division in WWE for some time to come, probably racking up multiple more tag title wins, whether that be on Raw, SmackDown, or maybe even NXT. And who knows, maybe we'll even get to see Tama Tonga engage in another solo run at some point down the line because, as we saw during his run out east, he is capable of winning singles gold too. For the most part though, it likely will be in the tag division the duo remains, as that's where they're best served. And it's there they'll probably at some point fall into the orbit of our next subjects, the Motor City Machine Guns. That's right, for years it's been known that the team made up of Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley is easily one of the best of their generation. In fact, if you were to list the best tag teams of the 2010s and beyond, then they have to be in the same conversation as acts like the Usos, the New Day, and the Briscoe brothers. The only thing that held them back, in fact, was that they never got a run in a true big league, as for the vast majority of their time together, they'd be working in places like TNA and Ring of Honor. Sure, the Guns would have a lot of success there. Hell, across those two promotions alone, they'd become tag team champions on 4 separate occasions. And in TNA, they'd each at one point have runs with the world title in a singles capacity. But the feeling was very much that if they wanted to add that final merit badge to their legacy, then at some point before they called it a day, they were going to have to go bigger. So when their most recent TNA contracts came up in 2024 then, everyone involved knew it was time for them to make the jump. And so it was then that Sabin and Shelley would join WWE, a decision which worked out well for them because it was in their second match as part of the SmackDown roster on October 25th of that year that they beat DIY to become the new WWE Tag Team Champions. Of course, since that moment they have dropped the belts back to Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa, but that doesn't mean they're being buried or anything. No, we fully expect MCMG to hold those belts at least once more before they decide to hang up their boots. And once they've won those belts again, who knows? They might even jump over to Raw and snag the World Tag Team Championships from someone like the Judgment Day or the New Day. And after that, we see the Guns calling it a day and moving over to a backstage role with the company, likely either as trainers or road agents. But while this will be sad, it will be well-deserved for them, as they've certainly put the work in over the years to be regarded as being amongst the best at what they do, and amongst the most influential too. Hell, it's specifically because they're so great that Triple H had them skip NXT when they first joined WWE and instead move straight up to the main roster. But that's not the case with everyone. No, when it comes to some people, they need that run in the developmental brand to adapt to being in a new country, as has been the case with our next subject, Julia. That's right, if you've been a fan of Joshi wrestling over the last few years, then you'll know that there have been few more exciting talents out there than Julia. Come 2024, however, she was going to try her luck out west, and that was confirmed when it was revealed that Julia would be joining the WWE roster. And this led to her making her debut down in Florida, where NXT was based, with this giving her a chance to not only adapt to the WWE style, but also adapt to bringing her and her family over to a whole new country. How has she managed with this? Pretty well as it happened, because while many feared that her style wouldn't mesh with WWE, she's been able to make things work great, to the point that as it stands at the time of this video's recording, she's the current NXT Women's Champion, a belt she won after beating Roxanne Perez at New Year's Evil on January 7th, 2025. Where will her future take her after this NXT run is over? Well, the main roster, we're sure, the very place where she'll get to lock it up with a whole new roster of women. The only question is, how many world titles will she win on Raw and SmackDown? As far as the present is concerned, however, Julia will be all about defending her gold in NXT against each and every comer, and at some point, that's going to put her on the opposite side of the ring from our next subject, someone who's currently a friend of hers, but who could become an enemy very easily. Who are we talking about here? Why, Stephanie Vaquer, of course.
When I was young, I wanted to be a doctor, but I ended up making oatmeal. I'm Brian Tate. I'm the founder and CEO of Oatmeal.
Yes, while she may not have been as high profile as Julia up until recently, this would all change once Stephanie signed with WWE, with her making her debut at a live event in South America almost immediately thereafter. Not that this would lead to a main roster run for her quite yet, though. No, first she'd be sent down to NXT, where she'd get a chance to fully adapt to the new style by working with the likes of Cora Jade and Kalani Jordan. And all the while she was doing this, she'd be reuniting with an old friend in Julia. Of course, given Julia is now NXT Women's Champion, a belt La Primera probably wants for herself one day, we wonder how long that friendship can ultimately hold up. No, the truth is likely going to be that, like with most wrestling friendships, this one is doomed to end in disaster as Stephanie and the Beautiful Madness come to blows. And when that happens, we could honestly see the South American being the one to come out on top and start her own run with that particular piece of hardware. Where will her career take her from there? Well, again, like with Julia, we see the main roster being the ultimate landing spot for Vaquer. And we have no doubt she's going to have a great time there because she's going to get to mix it up with some true world-class talent. We're talking about names like Io Sky, Charlotte Flair, and Bianca Belair here. But let's move away from the women of NXT for a moment and back over to the men, as it's there we find our next subject, someone who made quite a splash quickly after joining the roster there in May of 2024, someone who goes by the name of Ethan Page. And this was surprising to many because while All Ego has always been a very good wrestler, there was always a ceiling on him in places like TNA and AEW, as there he was very much slotted into a mid-card role, someone who could have a good match but who was never going to be treated seriously as a world title contender. Of course, this left him with a lot of frustrations after a certain point as he believed he could be more. And it was those beliefs which eventually saw him make the jump to WWE when his AEW contract ran out. How would he fare in his new home of WWE? Well, While many assumed he'd get the Shawn Spears role of player coach, someone who could work with the young talents but wouldn't be going over any of them, in the end it was the opposite which happened, as after immediately staking his claim to the NXT World title then being held by Trick Williams, Page would actually win this when he faced off against the champ in a four-way match at Heatwave on July 7th, which also included Javon Evans and the chairman himself. That's right, after only 40 days on the roster, Ethan Page was a world champion for the first time. And while he has since dropped that belt back to Trick Willie, he remains a focused upon act on the developmental brand. And when he no doubt moves up to the main roster, we could easily see him slotting right into the mid-card scene there and mixing it up well with the likes of Chad Gable, Carmelo Hayes, and Austin Theory. Who knows? Maybe by that point an old friend and tag team partner of his, Josh Alexander, will have joined WWE too, and we could see the pair go on a tag team run taking on opponents such as DIY, the War Raiders, and the Creed Brothers. Whatever happens, we see All Ego having a good run once he finally ascends to Raw or SmackDown and probably retires there. Then, once he's hung up his boots, we expect to see him follow the likely Motor City Machine Guns path by getting a new job as a backstage producer or trainer. Hell, there's every chance that while he's on the main roster, he even gets to mix it up with a former AEW alumni of his, someone who's also recently jumped over to the Fed. Who are we talking about this time? Who else but Penta? That's right, during his time in AAA, Penta became a one-time Latin American champion, a one-time mixed tag team champion, and a three-time world tag team champion. And that's not even getting into the run he then had in Lucha Underground between 2014 and 2018, with it being there that he first truly got over to an English-speaking audience as a masked man who would break your arm at the drop of a hat. Even then, though, this would be nothing compared to the success he'd go on to have in All Elite Wrestling once that company formed in 2019, as it was there that, with his brother Ray Phoenix serving as his tag team partner and Pac occasionally serving as the Death Triangle Trio teammate, he'd go on to become one of the star attractions of the division. Hell, so much of a star attraction would Penta and his teammates be, at All Out in 2021, he and Phoenix would become tag team champions in a Great Steel Cage match. Come late 2024, though, it was clear that both Penta and Phoenix had hit a wall, and that there was nothing else for them to achieve in the tag division. And this all led to Penta making his debut with WWE on the January 13th, 2025 episode of Raw, to a hero's welcome. That's right, debuting the Lucha star in the largely Hispanic market of San Jose proved to be a great move, as it instantly made Penta feel like a superstar. And with him scoring early victories over the likes of Chad Gable and Pete Dunne, as well as getting the Iron Man spot in the 2025 Royal Rumble, it looks like any momentum he's built up already is set to continue. What does this mean for his future? Well, it'll likely mean continued singles action. But once his former teammate and brother Ray Phoenix becomes a free agent himself, we may even see the Lucha Brothers return to tag team action and make that division their own, just as they have in every other company they've worked together in the past. But let's move over to NXT again for a moment, as it's there we find our next great recent free agent signing from WWE, someone who also made a splash at this year's Royal Rumble. That's right, it's time for us to talk about Jordynne Grace. Yes, Jordynne signing with WWE has been highly likely ever since she began making appearances on NXT TV in the summer of 2024. Even before that, though, it was obvious this would be her landing spot eventually because, with her great physique, she was bound to make it to the big leagues as she has star written all over her. And it's not as if she was all look either back during her time in Impact. No, she was great in the ring too, with this being exactly why she'd become a three-time Knockouts champion and one-time digital media champion during her run there. In fact, so dominating of a force was she'd at one point even lock it up with men like Matt Cardona and Bully Ray. Of course, once she started appearing in NXT though, this allowed her to mix it up with a whole new roster of talent, and it also introduced her to a much wider audience. And Jordynne would certainly take advantage of these new eyeballs seeing her for the first time here, as she stood in the middle of the ring with Roxanne Perez, Sol Ruca, and Wendy Chu, all while looking every bit as much of a star as they were. Yes, by now it was clear TNA wasn't going to be big enough to hold on to the Austin native for the long term. And that all led to her making her official debut as a full-time member of the WWE roster at February 1st, 2025's Royal Rumble PLE. Where will she go from there? Well, it's unclear if she'll start in NXT or the main roster just yet, but we expect her to probably spend a little bit of time in developmental first, where she can have matches against Julia and Stephanie Becker. And then when that's over, we see her making a quick move up to the main roster to become a thorn in the side of Raw and SmackDown stars such as Rhea Ripley, Bayley, and Liv Morgan. Needless to say then, this will almost certainly lead to title success for her at some point in the not-too-distant future. Really, who's to say that she doesn't one day do what a Becky Lynch has done before her and become one of the rare handful of women to main event to WrestleMania? Anything is possible when you're Jordynne Grace. But what about another recent addition to the NXT women's roster? Someone who came in with a little bit less fanfare, but who has also been hard at work making a name for herself there recently too. Well, she's our next subject as it happens, Zarya.
Ever wondered what your home looks like from space? Enter your address and get a 360-degree satellite view of your home right now.
Now, while fans of TNA would have already known who Jordynne Grace was prior to her signing with WWE, there are probably a lot of people who were only seeing Zarya for the first time when she signed on the dotted line with the Fed in the autumn of 2024. And the reason for this is because prior to this, the Australian-born star had never really made it beyond her home continent all that much. No, with her only being 4 years into her career at that point, she'd done the vast majority of work for Adelaide-based promotion Riot City Wrestling. That said, while working for RCW, the woman then going by the name of Delta would make quite a splash in her own small way as she'd become a one-time RCW Women's Champion and, for a while at least, a one-time RCW Men's World Champion too. So it was clear big things were going to be in her future regardless of where that future ultimately lay. But none of that answers the question as to how she first fell under the radar of WWE. Well, this would happen when, while heading over to Perth to hold their annual Elimination Chamber show in February of 2024, the Fed would hold a series of tryouts with local talent. And it would be during these tryouts then that Delta would first get noticed, with this leading to her being offered a contract. Yes, it was the big breakout she'd been looking for, and once her visa was sorted out and she was able to make it across to the US, she'd start how she meant to go on, with a splash, when she appeared on NXT TV and made short work of early opponents like Brynlee Reese. Sure, the woman now going by the name of Zarya wouldn't be able to dethrone Roxanne Perez as NXT Women's Champion, despite being the one to pin the Prodigy in a 10-woman tag on the November 6, 2024 episode of NXT. But she would continue to shine whenever she was given TV time. All we can assume then is that Shawn Michaels still has plans to give her that gold at some point, and that when he does, it'll lead to Zarya truly breaking out of the pack. But what about one of her male counterparts on NXT? When will his breakout moment come? That's right, it's time to talk about Lexis King. Yes, as the son of the late, great Brian Pillman, Lexis certainly has a lot to live up to. And this was evident as far back in his early days in Major League Wrestling, where he became a one-time World Tag Team Champion, just as it was during his run in All Elite Wrestling, where he served as the Varsity Blondes tag partner to Griff Garrison. Still, even then, there was always a sense that the Cincinnati native had something to him. It was just a case of him being able to tap into it and find out what it was. Unfortunately for him, though, he wouldn't find this in either of those promotions. No, it wouldn't be until he joined WWE in the autumn of 2023 that he really began to connect the dots of his character. Has this translated to success in the ring for Pillman Jr., though? Well, while it took a while, it has started to pay off a little, as it was in December of 2024 that, with a little help from William Regal, he'd be able to beat Charlie Dempsey to win the NXT Heritage Cup. And with him still holding that prize as of the time of this video's recording, it seems like the momentum is at last swinging in an upward direction for the Ohio native. Really, it's just a question of how high the momentum will take him at this point. Will he win any belts on NXT before his run there is done? It's certainly possible. And once that's over and he inevitably heads up to the main roster, we could certainly see him filling a nice mid-card role there in the vein of an Austin Theory or a Grayson Waller. Hell, we could even see him joining up with these two to form a trio. Yes, if he can continue on the path he's going on now, we're sure he'll continue to get over with fans more and more, as he truly has limitless potential. But then the same could be said about everyone we've looked at today, because with all the skills they have, they're each a great example of a signing WWE has made so as to ensure that their future remains secure for a long time to come.
This is what Ivy League universities you can get into with a 3.6 GPA.
90% of students with a 4.0 plus GPAs get rejected from universities like Harvard, Stanford, and other top.
Thank y'all for watching. I'm going to see y'all in the next one. Y'all stay tuned.